En la cena de gala, su director, Jan Harsan, presentó al exministro de la Defensa de Canadá, Paul Hellyer.
And most recently, he has become interested in the whole subject of extraterrestrial presence on our planet and the superior technology that they display. And in September of 2005, he became the first person of a cabinet rank in a G8 nation to state unequivocally that UFOs are as real.
En la conferencia Control y Dominancia, Hellyer denunció que una élite de banqueros, el Grupo Cabal, encubre la realidad del fenómeno y controlan el nuevo orden mundial.
Who is running the United States? Not the President and Congress, but a cabal. The cabal, briefly described, would be an amorphous group headed by the banking cartel at the top. And then next to them would be the oil cartel, the heads of the transnational corporations, the CEOs of the transnational corporations. And then the intelligence agencies, parts of them, especially the CIA and the FBI and then the NSA, but the British MI6 and the Mossad are involved as well. But in reality, we have a problem when official U.S. policy insists that UFOs don't exist. The veil of secrecy must be lifted, and it has to be lifted now, before it's too late. It is ironic that the U.S. would begin a devastating war allegedly in search of weapons of mass destruction, when the most worrisome developments in this field are occurring in your own backyard. It is ironic that the U.S. should be fighting monstrously expensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, allegedly to bring democracy to those two countries, when it itself can no longer legitimately claim to be called a democracy, when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars have been spent on projects about which both the Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark. How much has been accomplished in 60 years of feverish activity by some of the most educated minds in the United States? Has America developed flying saucers that are visually indistinguishable from the visitors, as alleged? And if so, what do they propose to do with them? Even more critical, what progress has been made in the development of clean energy sources that could conceivably replace fossil fuels and save the planet from becoming a veritable wasteland? Well, who has the answers? Someone does, but apparently they aren't telling either secretaries of defense or presidents because they don't have, quote, a need to know. In a story told by Dr. Stephen Greer, President Clinton was asked a question by White House reporter Sarah McClendon about why he didn't do something about disclosure. And Clinton replied, "Sarah, there's a government inside the government, and I don't control it." Excuse me, doesn't the Commander-in-Chief and the person who allegedly has their finger on the nuclear trigger have a right to know what his subordinates are doing? The people of the United States who have paid the bills have the right to know. The people of the world demand to know because it is our descendants too whose lives are in mortal danger. It is time for the people of the United States to launch a new war against the evil of lies, deceit, and darkness, and go all out to win the victory of truth and transparency and light. Thank you. In 1940, the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C. decided that that Hitler was going to lose the war and that they should start preparing for the next empire, an American empire. And it was to comprise all of the area that Hitler had coveted, including the United Kingdom, all of North America, New Zealand, Australia, and much of the Southeast Pacific Rim. And they've been working at it ever since. They have linked forces with other organizations since, including the Bilderbergers, a post-war organization in Europe, which is the most secretive and one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful organization in the world today. And then the third, the Trilateral Commission, which was formed after Japan began its ascendancy. And these three have been working together, and I call them in my books the Three Sisters. They are the sort of the root of what I now call cabal, and other people call it the cabal as well. The cabal comprises the banking cartel, the oil cartel, the big transnational corporations, the intelligence agencies, many of them, but including the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and a couple of foreign ones, the MI6 from the UK and the Mossad from Israel, and a huge slice of the American military. And they are the cabal, and they have been running the United States for the last half century to the point where presidents have been little more than talking heads, and the Congress hasn't had a clue as to what was going on. After World War II, there was an operation called Operation Paperclip, which was approved by President Truman to bring Nazi scientists to the United States to help, presumably in the Cold War that would ensue. President Truman agreed on the condition that none of the scientists were to have been active members of the Nazi Party. The armed forces who were doing the invitation, the Army in particular, paid no attention to the president. As a former Minister of National Defense, I know how that works. And they recruited the ones they wanted. They gave them new names, new histories, and high-ranking jobs in the United States in the military and civil establishments. They were working on missiles and new weapon systems of various kinds. Well, then after the two crashes at Roswell, two UFO crashes at Roswell on July the 4th, 1947, one of the machines was sufficiently intact to be recovered, and they began back engineering that. Before long, they moved the operation to Nevada. And the president then was Eisenhower, and he wanted to know what they were doing out there, and they wouldn't tell him. So he threatened to send in the First Army from Colorado. And they capitulated and allowed him to send 4 trusted members of the CIA to visit Colorado and see what was going on. Well, what was going on was exactly what they really expected, and that is the back engineering of one of the vehicles from the Roswell area. I don't think there's been a president since, well, actually Truman, who has really been in the loop totally. President Eisenhower vented his frustration in his final speech to the American people at the time he was retiring from public life. He said, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." And the problem is we have paid no attention to him. An eyewitness who had worked in the company of President Eisenhower said what he was really concerned about was that the ET file had fallen into the wrong hands. And that's what he was really concerned about, and I wish he had said it. But that's, I guess, when the cover-up really got underway in earnest. Well, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. This cabal, their end game, is a world government. They're calling it the New World Order, which is unelected and accountable only to them. That's what they're doing. And they're well on the road to do it. And you know, they were smart. They said, we won't do what Hitler did and try to take over all this world, these countries by military means. We will do it by using our brains and using the monetary system to crush the various countries to the point where the people will be glad to accept a military government. And we will use trade agreements, which are not really trade agreements, but which are, in effect, transfers of power from the people, the elected people, to the banking cartel and the transnational corporations. And they put a thing in the trade agreements, which is called the dispute settlement mechanism. And it actually works this way, that if any government, like a provincial government in Canada or a state government in the United States, does something that affects the profits or potential profits of a foreign company, they can sue the government of Canada for lost profits or even lost potential profits, can you believe? They have more rights in Canada than Canadian citizens, and of course it works the same way with the United States. It's wrong in principle. Two final words. The reason they don't want us to know what they're doing is because of too many of us knew what they were doing. They might not be able to get away with it. And the reason that you don't read about it is that if you get a copy of Daniel Estulin's most recent book, he was the writer of The True Story of the Bilderberger. There are several pages, chapter and verse, that show that every major news outlet in the English-speaking world is controlled by a Bilderberger. Thank you very much.